question I was asked about 60 years ago was, how did the whale's nose evolve to go to the back of his head? And we're going to explore whale evolution on Revolution Against Evolution. Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
And here on Zoom, this is Rich Gear, your co-host, and happy to be here, Doug. So we're going to talk about a whale of a tale. Is that what the deal is, or what?
Or was it just a fluke?
Or was it just a fluke? We got those in, didn't we?
And so the fluke part of it is that many of the scientists in this world believe in evolution, that whales evolved from land creatures millions of years ago. Well, it couldn't have been that long ago because they have to explain the evolution of those creatures that are on the land from creatures that lived in the sea millions of years before. And so,
Well, didn't they originally think the whale was a sea creature, then went on land, and then went back to the sea? Am I mistaken on that? That's what I remember.
Well, you go from fish to amphibians to reptiles to mammals and other creatures of that sort. So that
And the whale's a mammal, so
the whales is a mammal, and so because of that, you have to say that somehow the mammal that was on the land evolved back into the sea, and they just continued to go towards the seashore and then dive in and do the more exploring. And as they did so, in a Lamarckian way, they evolved into whales. And
as we like to say, a Malarkian way, right?
yeah, Malarkian way, yes.
Yeah. Anyway.
Now, here's what you have to understand is either it works or it doesn't. And it's an on-off switch. You have to have all the transitional forms fully functional in all of the aspects of the environment that they live in. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And it's interesting to note that in the Bible, you talk about the sequence of creation. One of the first creatures that it mentions when they were the creatures on the land were and the sea was the great whales. And so you have the grasses and all that stuff starting, was created on one day, and then the whales and the sea creatures and the birds were created on the next day. And then you have other animals being created in about the fifth day, and then on the sixth day you had man. Well, that's a sequence that makes sense to me because you have to have everything working or it doesn't work. You have to have the food in there for the creatures to eat in order for those creatures to actually thrive, and otherwise they're dead. And they also have to have genetic information that has to be able to be absorbed by eating or and drinking, and those conditions need to be perfect in order for it to work. And so we take things for granted, and so you have those who are skeptics of God. They don't like the idea of following God. They have to make up a new scenario for why things are on this earth the way they are. And here are some of the features of the whale that is specific to its environment in the water. Either, like I said, either it works or it doesn't. You have to move the nose to the back of his head. You have to streamline the body, lose its feet and flippers and make flippers and fins and flukes in this case. You have to lose its hair, and you have to develop blubber for insulation. You have a tail fluke. You have fins for directional control, heat exchange circulatory system that's designed for that environment. And then you have to have a specialized respiratory system, which includes the nose at the back of this head. So when it surfaces, it doesn't have to stick its nose out of the water to get to breathe. And so either it works or it doesn't. You have, and then it drinks seawater. You have to have some sort of way to eliminate the salt. And so,
Oh, yeah.
and so the land animals doesn't have that feature. And then the echolocation system. Now we'll get to explore this one a little bit because this is where our evolutionist friends talk about features that they think came about through these fossils that they found. And in some cases, you have toothed whales. You have then other cases they have baleen, and so developing the baleen is quite a interesting mechanism. And then you have the whales being able to give birth underwater. And in order to do that, it's always a breech birth. And the specialized ear morphology is what we're going to discuss next. And this is in the fossil record that evolutionists believe is the evidence that shows that these are whale fossils that they're finding.
See, Doug, I want to stop you just for a second. The idea that everything has to work or nothing works, do they have any ideas or any postulates, if you will, or theorems or theories as how the whale would go from a non-streamlined to a streamlined thing, or how they would go, how blubber would be created, or how these flukes and fins and flippers, how that the heat exchange mechanism? Are there anything? Is there anything remote way of explaining how these actually came to be through evolutionary processes? And I realize these are just so stories. Most of the time, they're kind of made up without any real evidentiary facts. But do they have propositions or ideas about this? I've never really read anything. I'm not saying there isn't anything. I just wanted to ask you that question if you knew.
I can't find anything where
I have never found anything. They just
explain.
say that it just happened, and I go, well, in our basic idea that this takes as much or more faith than we have. We at least have we have a creator which makes sense who exists outside of space and time, who made space and time and the thing all that is there within it, including the whales. And so it makes sense to me that they were not land creatures or originally sea and then land and then sea again. It's like they can't make up their mind. And what I don't understand is how this non-directional random chance scenario, everything they explain seems to be directed and purposeful to where it happens, even in an evolutionary scenario. It's like they want to go back to the sea. Why would they want to go back to the sea? Why would they develop processes that make that possible? Whether it's echolocation or any of the other things. These are questions that to me are unanswerable from a secularist, naturalistic viewpoint, except that their hearts are literally hell bent on rejecting the fact that there's a creator that we are subject to and that we are beholden to and who sets the rules. Okay? We are basically telling you that there are reasons to believe in a creator. We're trying to remove obstacles, but in the meantime, we're trying to stick with what we could see in the fossil and the physical realm around us. And it still, nothing makes any sense from an evolutionary scenario. I mean, it really does not. Malarkianism makes as much sense as neo-Darwinism as far as this goes. That's what I can see. And so they have to default to fossils where we don't have soft tissue, we don't have lungs, we don't have working mechanisms, and so they can make up any kind of thing they want by putting these fossils together. And so let's go into the fossil record, and I know you're going to talk about this with all the transitional fossils that they use to try to substantiate this morphological change over time, which is beyond measure because it does not explain these basic premises. Look, Doug, we go back to the very beginning. How does anything need oxygen? How nothing that lives doesn't need oxygen. Well, maybe there might be some creatures in some of those steam vents, but basically the living creatures, whether it's fish, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, birds, all of these need oxygen.
Okay, the argument with that, Rich, is that oxygen is an enemy to the reactions that promote the origin of life through
Correct.
biogenesis. That's where the argument is.
So
Now,
from the very beginning, we're in trouble, from a
we
naturalistic,
are in trouble
secularistic,
from the,
evolutionary.
but what I'm saying is that yes, they have to propose that there is a environment that was without oxygen, and then there was a great oxygenation event where the Earth was supplied with oxygen, but it was only in
Yeah.
time where it didn't interfere with the prebiotic soup that they believed the world.
Exactly. Fortuitous circumstance, wouldn't you say, Doug?
That's right. Yeah, I think
From a
that.
naturalistic setting, this is a faith statement, Doug. This
Mhm.
is a religious statement, from what I can say. All right, I was a little bit off, a little bit in the weeds, but so I know you're going to get to the transitional fossils that they use as one of their main premises. So let's go into that, Doug.
Well, let's look at the one which I think is the one that they most use is the Pakicetus, and they only found a few fragments of this creature, and so, but they thought that what they found was enough to relate it to whales. And when more complete fossils were found, it was clear that it was fully terrestrial. There's nothing, with evolving fins or anything like that about this creature. But what they were looking at was Astragalus, which are the ankle bones of this creature. And
Okay.
sort of like hippos and the antelopes, they have certain ankle bones, and they were figuring, well, this is more towards aquatic type of creatures like the hippo.
Oh,
And
okay.
so, and then this creature was about the size of a dog. It was about 4 feet long. It was carnivorous. I don't know how they knew that, but
Teeth,
yeah,
maybe the teeth, they assume.
teeth, yeah. But the thing that they harped on in this was the robust ear bones. And what they're looking for there is the echolocation thing system. And they were saying, well, this particular creature had the similar type of inner ear structure as the whale, and so
Okay.
we believe that this is where the start of all of this came from. And there's another creature called the Ambulocetus, and it has the double pulley Astragalus like hippos again. Uh, there's not much information on some of these other variations called Rodhocetus, Remingtonocetus, and then uh, Protocetus, Myacetus, Niparagecacetus, and Paragocetus.
What's interesting, Doug, is that word cetus. Is that the word where the whales get, they call them cetaceans? Is it related?
Exactly. That's
Ah, I see. Yeah. So
and
by naming something, they're just like magically transforming these creatures into precursors to whales, is what you're saying.
exactly is what it is. And this is a typical tactic of evolutionists is that when they really don't have an explanation for something, they'll make up a long scientific sounding word for it. And so,
Sounds like an evolutionary bait and switch to me.
yeah. And so there was another one called the Basilosaurus. And that one, I can't really find I think that's one of those that popped up and faded into importance. There was the Indohyus, and again, this is it was the morphology of the inner ear of this particular creature that said, well, this is part of of the evolution of whales because it was a thickened wall of the inner ear. It's called the involucrum. In this creature, they admit that none of these individual animals on this evogram, or what it is, where they put them in sequence, is the direct ancestor of any other. And so they don't have a genetic map. They don't have a morphological map. What they have is a very loosely put together homology map, where they're finding pieces of these creatures that resemble what the whales have, but is really not working there. Now, the Dorundon, this was really a giant eel. It did not have the double pulley Astragalus because it was more sea creature. It has a fluke, but there's no gradual appearance of the fluke. It has this long, narrow snout. And so it's sort of like my typical, I've used this before, where I've lined up my silverware on the
Oh
table,
yeah.
and you have forks evolving into spoons. And so it is not a good example of evolution.
You mean a spork is not the evolutionary missing link?
No, it isn't.
From a spoon to a fork?
And so the fact that you can actually take features of creatures and line them up into a sequence doesn't mean that that sequence shows a line of descent. And I think that is true for any of the evograms that we have, like for the horse series or for the, for evolution of dogs or anything of that sort. That, just because you can line these things up doesn't give you a genetic reason to say that this is something that happened over millions of years.
No, these are all faith statements as far as I could see. I
Yeah.
mean, they use things like, well, obviously evolution uses, you know, the, I don't know, genetic, they try to use, but in fossils it's irrelevant. Genetic evidences and mutation rates are an irrelevancy, but that's the mechanism that they're trying to promote natural selection and mutation to cause macro, evolutionary changes so you can change from one kind of a creature to another. But with fossils, that's a moot point. You don't have any soft tissue or anything you can get genetic evidence from, which begs the question, Doug. This is not about the whale, of course, but we've talked about this. But they are finding soft tissue in some supposed millions of years old things. They are finding some of that. I don't know what they're finding genetic evidence from, but they're finding some soft tissue and hemoglobin and collagen and things of that nature that really unfossilized bone. I would love to see if they're able to pull any genetic stuff out of this, but none of that's really going to help you either because the creatures we discussed in the fossil record are all usually fully formed. Only by lining something that looks similar, homology, but that doesn't tell you really anything. We have lots of things living that look very similar that are in any way, shape, or form related. In fact, genetically, I just heard from a friend of ours, and and I've read this before, that we're more genetically related to a pig than we are to an anthropoid ape. So that whole thing doesn't the genetics doesn't really help you at all, in some
Well, what you
respects.
have is a creator who's an intelligent designer,
And he's
much
he's
like
creative.
a computer programmer who takes the various features that he creates in different creatures, and he uses the same uh, genetic code to produce the
That's
same
kind of our template,
in
right?
something else, and so you have something like the duck-billed platypus, which has a duck-like bill, a furry furry coat. You have reptilian's shoulder girdle. You have fang on his claws that is toxic or poisonous,
Like a snake,
like a snake. Or
fur like a mammal, hip girdle
yeah,
like a reptile.
the proper term is venomous. Okay.
Okay,
The
but
duck-billed platypus is venomous.
venomous. Okay, And then you have a duck bill, like a looks like a duck's bill, like a
Right.
bird, you know.
And so you have all these creature features, the web feet in front and the claws in the back. And so it has a worm finding radar, dines on the worms, and lives in Australia, lays eggs, but is a mammal. And the only other creature that lays eggs, which is a mammal, is the echidna. It looks nothing like the duck-billed platypus.
They look nothing alike. That they put that in the taxonomy because they don't fit anywhere else. In fact,
Right.
didn't they when they first someone brought one back, what the turn of, I mean, late 1800s, early 1900s, I can't remember when it was, but they um
1800.
they thought the guy sewed the things together and made a fake animal.
Yeah.
They didn't think it was a real animal. And that's the point because it doesn't fit any of the normal things. So they invent taxon, or a taxonomy classification because they don't have anything for it. And how many things I'm even wondering, I mean, we've had so much extinction over the course of what we believe since the flood times. And of course, during the flood, obviously, many creatures may have gone extinct during the time of the flood. I don't really know, but I'm assuming a lot of the extinction rates happened but we have had extinction ever since then. We've had passenger pigeons and dodo birds and the giant elk and the moa, all of these things are things that have gone extinct even in recent or fairly recent times. So my point of it is that using fossils is as a transitionary thing, as you mentioned with the spoon to the fork type analogy, it doesn't really work, but it's all they have, Doug, because you don't have genetic evidence. You can't study mutation. You can't look at soft tissue. You can't look at creatures. We just don't have enough information from the fossil record to determine any kind of real transitionary rate. But they continue to do it. I saw an interesting video the other day from a guy, actually my son's boss, and it's about the feathered birds and the feathered dinosaur stuff.
Mhm.
And things I never realized. I knew that the velociraptor was not 6 feet tall, but it's more like the size of a turkey. But the way his hip girdle is designed, he's probably a bird. He was not a dinosaur, okay? The way he was, and because the way they reconstruct things, they want to make it more like reptilian, but the hip girdle is more like a bird wing.
Mhm.
And that was shocking to me, kind of disappointing because I like watching Jurassic Park and I like the dinos, but Velociraptor because they've been trying to do this since Huxley, trying to imitate the bird into dinosaur stuff. So this whale stuff, getting back to that, it's the same kind of scenario, Doug. They're doing a just so story because they want to prop up a secular naturalistic worldview, a world that exists without God, where we are the gods of the universe. And I think we're pretty poor gods if that's the case. That to me does not work.
Now, it turns out, Rich, that you and I are involved in this DNA sequencing project because of a donation I made to the Creation Research Society. I went out
Yes,
to visit Dr. Joel Brown, who is the director of the Van Andel Creation Research Center
right.
in Glendale, Arizona. And this is at the Arizona Christian University. And I was talking with them on what their needs were, and they said that we've gotten all this research that we're doing on dinosaur soft tissue and being able to extract it and see it under the microscope. But what we really need is a DNA sequencing machine.
Yes.
I told them, well, why don't you go out and buy one? I'll supply the funds. And and so they've already started some experiments with it on
This
things
is
like
totally awesome.
alligators and ostriches and things like that. But they're going to then when they extract dinosaur soft tissue sample, they're going to see if any of the DNA sequences that they get out of that are going to give us some clues of what they looked like. And so it's kind of a exciting thing that we are involved in, you and I personally. That
I mean, that's fascinating Doug, because I've not heard of any soft tissue from some of the quote microraptors. That's another one. Remember they put the seed up to make it look like the whale, but they also do the raptor. That's really a term for eagles and hawks. They call them raptors.
Mm-hmm.
And when they do velociraptors and Utah raptors, microraptors, and all these things, they're trying to show that these are birds, but are bird evolving into, or dinosaurs evolving into birds. But point of fact, they're either birds or they're dinosaurs. And I have not heard of any soft tissue from some of these raptor fossils. Have you heard any of that?
I haven't
I'm
seen.
not. It'd be interesting to see if they could extract some DNA from them. That'd be great. Be awesome
Of
to
course,
see.
this is something that the evolutionists themselves are reluctant to do because it would be something that they can't hide behind.
Well, remember the old expression, Doug? I heard it from Eric von Fange years ago, but he quoted, was it Einstein? I'm not sure who he was, but your prejudice allows you what you can see.
That's right.
And that's really, or your worldview in a sense. You can't see. Well, look, Doug, who were the ones that first started getting carbon-14 out of colon diamonds? Creationists.
That's right. Mm.
All right. Carbon-14 should not be existing in the matrix of those things. Should not. But there it is. Who are the ones that first started looking for soft? Well, I have to admit that what's her name? I always forget her. The
Very
blood.
Schweitzer.
Yeah, Mary Schweitzer. I always forget her name for some reason, and I shouldn't because she was an honest evolutionist. She got hemoglobin out of T-Rex, and that was pretty amazing. But she's the only honest one I've seen. The rest of them are all creationary people, including the guy who got Triceratops horn, got
Uh,
soft tissue out.
Mark Armitage.
Mark Armitage. Yeah, you're better at names than I am. I always forget the names. But anyway, all these things are creationary, original science, original experimentation, because our worldview does not preclude the fact that you could be able to find some of this stuff. And I think that's, as you said, that's very exciting, Doug, to see a DNA sequencing machine like that. I'm going to be fascinated to see in years to come what that would really come out. I think it's really going to throw a lot of monkey wrenches in some of the scenarios they've come up with these last few years. So I don't know. What do you think? That's what I
I
think.
think that if we take a look at the information we have on the internet now with artificial intelligence, I said I'm going to try this. Ask artificial intelligence this question: what are the arguments against whale evolution? And they came up with some pretty good questions here. And the first one was challenges with transitional fossils. And then the one key pillars of evolutionary theory is the existence of transitional fossils that demonstrate gradual changes over time. In whale evolution, fossils such as Pakicetus, Ambulocetus, and Rodhocetus are often cited as representatives of immediate forms between terrestrial mammals and fully aquatic whales. However, critics argue that these fossils do not convincingly show a gradual transformation. And there's 3 bullet points. Some skeptics contend that morphological changes required from a transition from land to water, such as development of flippers, blowholes, and streamlined bodies, are too drastic for the available fossil record to explain adequately. They also highlight gaps in the fossil record, arguing that the absence of numerous intermediate forms undermines the plausibility of gradual evolution.
Hmm.
Additionally, some claim that features attributed to transitional forms may be misinterpreted or better explained as adaptations for a specific ecological niche rather than evidence for evolution. And so AI here is getting it right. We'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.